Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome in Hasselt University. We will have two speakers to open the conference. First of all, I would like to give the word to our Vice Director Education, Professor Wanda Gudens.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. Dear guests, dear speakers, dear colleagues. It's great to welcome all of you to Hasselt University for the 2022 Higher Education Summit. When people from abroad visit us, I always point to the strong irony residing in this place. Initially, this former prison was built to wall off its inhabitants from the outside world. Doors locked, windows barred. Today, it's an open house, serving as a place of public debate and as the proud home of this university. In a way, this building symbolizes how universities over centuries evolved from almost isolated places where knowledge was stashed away into places connected to society, with ideas and people flowing freely. Making connections, dear guests, is what this conference is all about. Connections between people, connections with the world, connections between ideas addressing one of today's biggest challenges, forging a truly sustainable society. How can we, students, teachers, professors, researchers, policymakers, civil servants, entrepreneurs, transform learning? How can we improve our didactical approaches? How can we prepare students for a complex, uncertain future? These are just three of the many questions and issues we'll be tackling today and in the next 2 days, our keynotes, research lab sessions, debates, and workshops. Around the world, most, if not all, higher education institutions put their missions, minds, and means into the service of achieving more sustainable campuses, workflows, teaching, and research. You probably won't be surprised to hear that Hasselt University is no exception. In his message during the online teaser event way back in December, our rector Bernard van Heusden already referred to our key ambition to build an organization that puts sustainability first. We are not there yet, but we have made some important strides in the past few months. Our education policy plan, for example, has some clear goals and actions related to stimulating transformative learning with our teachers and enhancing so-called sustainability skills with our students. And our brand new Masters in Matriomics, starting this academic year, will train students in conceptualizing and developing alternative sustainable materials. By weaving the challenge of sustainability deeply into our learning, we want to equip students with the mindset and skills needed to make the green transition a springboard rather than a disruption. Recently, Hasselt University also joined Eureka Pro, a European university network that enables students and staff to study, teach, and do research in responsible consumption and production. And I would also like to refer to our solid sustainability research expertise we've established over the years. We have internationally renowned researchers worked on issues relating to the circular economy, the sustainable management of natural resources, behavioral change, food security, the disposal and avoidance of toxic waste and pollutants, environmental legislation, and artificial intelligence. We also conduct research into the social dimension of sustainability with topics related to, for example, more inclusive workplaces. Our Institute for Materials Research is an important player in the development of new materials to be used in solar panels and batteries. And our Center for Environmental Sciences and its Field Research Center study the impact of climate change on biodiversity. You will learn more about that during your visit to the Ecotron Hasselt University. Dear guests, dear colleagues, we do all this not because every institution in the world does. We do it because we firmly believe that we are responsible for the places around us. As a civic university, we are strongly committed to the economic, social, cultural, and yes, environmental life of the region we are part of. When you're visiting Sea Mine tonight and the Hoge Kempen National Park on Thursday, you'll see where this region is coming from. You'll see firsthand how this community evolved from one of coal mines to a community of successful companies, ecosystems, and research hubs where scientists, students, entrepreneurs, and civic societal organizations are shaping a more sustainable future. Hasselt University is very proud to be part of that transformation. My point is not putting sustainability first in our teaching and research, not putting sustainability first in our further growth and development. Not doing so would hamper this region's resilience and progress, and it would severely diminish our relevance to society. I'm sure, dear guests, this conference will offer new perspectives and insights to take our ambitions and goals, shared by so many universities and communities across the globe, to the next level. Dear guests, dear colleagues, before I give the floor to the co-president of the Copernicus Alliance, our colleague, Professor Tom Kuppes, I want to thank a few people. First of all, the members of the Higher Education Summit Core Team, Organizing Committee and Scientific Committee. Thank you for your hard work in the run-up to this conference. I know that you've spent many hours thinking, discussing, and planning. A quote from the former US Secretary of State James Baker springs to mind. Prior preparation prevents poor performance, the 5 Ps. I'm confident that your preparations have paved the way for a successful event. Also, a big thank you also goes to all the keynote speakers and session leaders for providing inspiration and food for thought to all of us. And last but not least, I'm very grateful to the Copernicus Alliance, de Vrije Universiteit Brussel, We Recycle, and Duurzaam Educatiepunt for their support in the run-up to the 2022 Higher Education Summit. To conclude, dear guests, I wish you a very fruitful conference. And when you return home, I hope you look back with pleasure on the time you spent in this jail-turned university. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Rector. Dear guests, finally, we're back together again. Also from our side, the leadership team of the Copernicus Alliance, we'd like to welcome you in Hasselt, a city that likes to profile itself as the capital city of taste. Therefore, at your arrival, we offered you a goodie bag that does, for once, not contain printed programs, for obvious reasons of sustainability, of course, but which contains the taste of the social economy. This way, we support a local non-for-profit organization that provides work to people with a distance to the labor market. We hope you like it, just like we hope you will like the taste of this conference. 26th of November 2020, that is the earliest email I could trace back about this conference. So that's almost 2 years ago, in full lockdown. During the second COVID wave, I've been asked by the former leadership team of the Copernicus Alliance whether I would be interested in hosting the next conference of the Alliance in Hasselt. I was thrilled of joy that I could bring this higher education summit to my alma mater, Hasselt University. With the topic of today's conference in mind, using economic terminology, I am a true product of this university. After graduating as a business engineer, I did my PhD in environmental economics at the Center for Environmental Sciences. At Hasselt, we have a long tradition of doing environmental research, from phytoremediation to, as you will see during our excursion on Thursday, the impact of climate change on local biodiversity. Since a few years, with the start of the new format for teacher trainings in Flanders, the so-called educational masters, we added a new research line to that on education for sustainable development. I have the honor to educate future teachers in economics. So probably you understand why I was even thrilled more when the Copernicus Alliance proposed to choose daring to transform learning for a future-proof economy as the main theme of this conference. Those who joined us already in December 21 for the online teaser will have tasted our approach at the Copernicus Alliance's conferences. In a few minutes, this conference will be opened by our first keynotes, who will stimulate our appetite for learning about and doing economics in a different way, and donuts, of course. As the European Network on Higher Education for Sustainable Development, the Copernicus Alliance believes that higher education should be transformed, which requires some spicy new ways of teaching and learning. I think you can actually compare it to this. Those of you who are raising children probably remember how difficult it can be to learn your child to eat new things. Many of us probably all have their funny ways to tease their kids to try to eat veggies. Well, I hope, and I'm quite sure, that the keynotes and workshop leaders of today and tomorrow will inspire you to taste new ways of teaching and learning and experiment with them together with your students. Breaking silos between disciplines, adding some emotions in the classroom, opening up for cognitive and affective learning, providing triggering experiences that change the paradigms with which our graduates will stand in the world. We sincerely hope to help you and your higher education institution to move away from learning about to learning for and as sustainability. Before I officially declare this conference as being opened, I'd like to make some practical announcements as well. Right after the first keynote session, you can join us for a group picture at the square outside of the foyer. Whoever registered for the conference dinner tonight and the excursion on Thursday, we would like to ask you to be very in time, because we only have a few minutes to park the buses in front of the university. We've received some questions for today. The bus will leave today at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so please be there before 4 o'clock. Also, after 6 months of dry weather, it will finally rain again on Thursday. So take your umbrella and join us singing in the rain at our outdoor excursion. Those who would like to join the sustainability walk tomorrow evening, Please also make sure that you register in time, as places are really limited for the sustainability walks. You might also have seen our giant donut in the foyer. Do not hesitate to enter it. Walk around in it. Share your ideas for transforming higher education for a future-proof economy on the white papers that we have placed inside the donut. Those of you who also need a proof of attendance, you can pick it up at the registration desk. And last practical announcement, I warmly invite you for our Copernicus Alliance Happy Hour tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock at the Rainbow House. You can join us for this informal get-together where you will get the opportunity to meet many members of the Copernicus Alliance and the Alliance itself, of course. That is free of registration. I do not want to take away much of your time anymore because you're probably hungry for the keynotes by now. However, I do want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude for everyone who has made this conference possible. A lot of people have already been thanked by our vice rector, so I try to keep it short. But I would also like to thank you for being here and sharing your experiences regarding education for sustainable development with everyone else. The keynotes, workshop leaders, moderator, the people of the scientific committee, and the people of the organizing committee for their help in inspiring us and making this program possible. And lastly, thank you to the core team who weekly had to put up with me. Without your efforts, this event would never have been possible. And now I'm going to say a few names. Lotte, Lieven, Heidi and Ariane from our School of Educational Studies, thank you for sharing your expertise in organizing educational conferences. Marianne and Anita and Marleen, thank you for supporting us with the logistical help. Valeria, Kim, Mario, Benoit, Lisa and Charlotte, thank you for everything, especially in the last days, because you had to take over some of my responsibilities while I had to take care for my mom who had to undergo unexpected surgery. She's doing fine, but it really means the world to me that I could count on you. And that brings me back to what is essential in life. To reconnect with nature and the dearest people around you. Taking care of people and the planet, that is essentially what sustainable development is about. I hope that we can live this message, not only during this conference, but especially afterwards. Enjoy. Now I would like to invite the keynote speakers and the moderator to come up to stage. Thank you.
Good morning to you all. My name is Eddy van Hemelrijck. I will be moderating today, tomorrow, and hopefully also on Thursday. But before we start, do you know how many nationalities are here present? Take a guess. 10, 15, 20, actually 26. Talk to the neighbor and ask where he or she is coming from. Do it now, quickly. Okay, I'm going to ask you back. It's all about connection, like Tom said. So I think it's important that the couple of days that we're spent together, we do connect. Not only here, but also in the corridor and this evening and walking and so on. But I have the honor and the pleasure to introduce you to 4 magnificent people who are involved in education and sustainability. One of them is online. You see her already the whole morning up there. Kate, welcome. I'm glad you joined online. Introducing Kate is relatively easy. She's a renegade economist, if I can still call you like that, but that's certainly the truth, who published the Donut Economics. Are there people that didn't read the Donut Economics here in the audience? No? No, you don't dare to say that. Huh? Oh. There is a lot more to tell about her, but I'm not going to do it because we only have 1 hour. So I'm going to switch a bit. So I'm not going to go to the ladies first. I'm going to go to Sam. Sam de Muijnck. He's a chief economist at the Dutch independent think tank, Our New Economy. He's part of Rethinking Economics. Do we have more Rethinking Economics members in the audience? 1, 2, 3. Huh? So he'll talk about it perhaps a bit later. I also wrote down that he's a breakdance teacher. So if it's getting too boring, we can do something else here as well. Okay, let's move on to sitting next to me, Guia. in Italian, Guia in Spanish. She's the lead researcher and author of GreenComp, the European Sustainability Competence Framework for Lifelong Learning, which actually was published at the beginning of 2022. I must admit, also for me, it was new, but it's fantastic, the work she did, and she will probably talk about it this morning. So, like, looking forward to learn more about that. And then sitting opposite of me, which is also a local person from Antwerp, I wrote something that she was the former Africa desk editor, journalist and columnist of the Brussels-based quarterly Mo magazine. The author of The End of the Wide World, a decolonial manifesto. And I listened to a TED Talk of her of 2011, which is hilarious, but really good. So if you don't know what to do tonight, listen to it, okay? So that's a short introduction of the people sitting here. What we're gonna do, I'm gonna ask you to take your cell phone and to go to Menti, because there are a lot of questions that we asked you to have a look at if you didn't do it yet. So the first thing is go to menti.com. We will show the code also when we show the questions. Go to 44060043. And I get a remark from Kate, but I will. Olivia Rutazibwa. Okay, thank you, Kate, for pointing it out to me. So did you manage to get to the Menti? Okay. You should see the questions, and we will show them also on there. So you're allowed to choose 2 questions, which is a bit sad because they're actually very interesting, all of them. So I don't know if I have to run you through them or if you're going to have a look at them yourselves. It's a bit complicated if I start reading them. The first, what should be the goal of rethinking curricula in higher education? The second, who should define the required curriculum? The third, how would you define a proper transformation process? The fourth, what is stopping curriculum change? The fifth, the European Commission launched a call to implement GreenComp. How do you do that? And the sixth, decolonizing the curriculum in a broad sense is a very important goal. Where do you already see good practices in this field? So these are the 6 questions. You can choose 2. We'll give you 1 minute for it, so it's really short. So the code is 44060043. So I repeat, 44060043. Who managed already to choose? So I can see a bit of, okay. Maybe we can show the Menti, or just gonna, okay. So here we can see the evolution. So it's a bit of competition now. Yeah, this is part of the economic world, unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately. So it looks like we're gonna go for question 4, 1, and 6. Okay, selection made, 4, 1, and 6. Okay, make sure I'm done. 4th question. What is stopping curriculum change? What do you think are the visible and invisible lock-ins that keep the traditional curriculum so dominant around the world? I'm going to ask the question first to Kate, so that we can also test if everything works properly. And at the same time, I think you have a lot to say about that. So, Kate, floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Real pleasure to join you, and thank you for making it possible for me to join here online. So what is stopping curriculum change? Woo, big question. I'll start with a little story. In fact, when I came to Belgium to launch Donut Economics in 2018, I was part of a really great seminar with economics professors from several different universities. We had really good conversation about how to bring new ideas into economic thinking and to transform the core ideas that are taught. And then after, in the coffee break, one of the younger professors, he was about 35 years old, he came up to me and he said, you know, I really like these ideas that you're sharing. I find it really exciting. I would love to be teaching this to my students, but I'm on track for getting tenure, so I have to be cautious. And that is the strongest thing I remember from that whole visit, because many people think, oh, what's stopping curriculum change is the old generation. It's those old professors. We need them to retire and then the new will just come through. And that makes it sound as if it's just individuals. And of course, it's much more structural than that. So people, even young, open-minded, enthusiastic new teachers get locked in. They get locked in by, of course, what the examination demands their students know. They get locked in by which are the journals that are recognized as the best journals to publish in, so they get their own research excellence points for their university. They get locked in by the fact that universities around the world are often ranked in terms of what's the starting salary for their graduates. And so what kind of education you're giving to those who go to be paid highest in the market economy. And they get locked in, of course, by peers and what is seen to be normal. It takes a lot more work to present a new worldview and to explain the whole wealth of a new worldview than it does just to add incrementally to the existing worldview. And that's why it's so much harder to present the new. So for all these structural reasons, we get locked in. And I think it's not surprising that where the new ideas are coming from are often the disruptors. It's the students, and I want to make a shout out to Rethinking Economics. It's civil society movements like Black Lives Matter, like Fridays for Future, that put pressure on the world and tell us your values, your ideas are way out of date, and this has to come into the university. So it's really important that we keep responding to this civic pressure and recognize all the financial and institutional and structural lock-ins that hold us back. Otherwise, we will sink back into them and keep performing for the same old journals and keep being cautious in order to get tenure on the same old track. I'll stop there because I really want to hear the others.
Okay, thank you. So it's structural. There is fear. It's about publications, rankings. So it's not an individual issue. It's a structural issue. You refer to Rethinking Economics, so I would like to go to Sam first. Can you add your comments to that and answers to that question, please?
Yeah, thanks. A lot of agreement. And I think from my experience, as I've mainly been active as rethinker, debating, lobbying sort of at the universities in the Netherlands for curriculum change. I think on the one hand, it is also just individual willingness. It does really play a role. If a person, a professor, a teacher is willing to do stuff, there is room. So even though there are all these structural factors, I wouldn't say it sort of makes it completely impossible to do anything. I don't think that's what Kate Raworth meant. But from my experience, yeah, I think there is a difference between the generations. So I do see that a lot of the younger professors are more open, but it's definitely not black and white. There are definitely also very old heterodox professors, for example, which we draw a lot of inspiration from. So in that way, we see that, yeah, when we push for change, it's often sort of the first step is convincing professors. And recently, my experience going also a bit into business education and what is in the Netherlands called hogescholen, or in German Hochschule, I think there is a lot more willingness. So professors, directors, program coordinators are very willing to change. And there the change is, yeah, we don't have to kick in the door and then make our demands and then have a fight and then maybe get a little bit of change, which happens often at the economics faculties. But at the business faculty, we come in and they say, oh, come, please. So what do you think? And directors say like, oh, I will fire my employees if they don't want to teach sustainability. And I'm like, wait. That's a whole different conversation to have. So I do think it is this, but I think in economics, the focus is very much on preparing students to one day publish in a journal, even though almost no students will ever do that. Most of them will go into business and government outside of academia, but still education is very much geared towards this. And I think in business education, it's way more focused on preparing students to go into businesses. And I think, at least from my perspective, that makes the debate around whether there needs to be change or not a very different debate.
So you add to the fact that it's also an individual responsibility of teachers and professors, and there is coming a bit more support. So I would like to go to Guia, because from the European perspective, you perhaps helped with that program.
Okay, thanks. If I may, I just would like to thank the organizers for the conference and welcome Kate to Raworth for the online session. Thanks.
Oh, your phone.
I hate these items. Test. Is it working? Okay. So actually, I quite agree with Kate Raworth and Sam with what they've just said. And I think ultimately it's resistance to change is everywhere. I face it constantly in my personal life as well, because that's how we do things around here. And, you know, often, as Sam was saying, it's also boils down to the individual. However, from the European perspective, so a lot has happened since 2018, from the first climate strikes. For example, if we think about the European Green Deal, which is the flagship of the von der Leyen Commission, which is basically modern policy making, is really arguing the case for stakeholder engagement, not just participation, actual participation and contribution. So that being said, what I want to say, it's important really to provide also common language for change to happen. And this is why I think, for example, the donuts economics or green the sustainability competence framework comes into the picture, because they provide a common language to move forward, to pick up on these individuals that ultimately need to collaborate together and to push the sustainability agenda to make change happen. So this is my perspective. Thanks.
Okay, so providing common language for transformational change will help the transformation action. Okay, thanks. Olivia, your thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm also very happy to be here. Hi, Kate. I think I want to join both the individual lens and also the really zooming out the super macro one, and just to add to what has been said. And I think the very uncomfortable truth about the things that we're trying to address here, if we zoom out, is that many of the institutions that we're speaking about were never designed for either sustainability, or even university was not necessarily designed to produce change. So if we think of it, there is a deep lock-in of conservative thought, or the reproduction of society happens through university. So I think that's the first thing that we really need to address, is that what are our universities for? And especially in economics department, like you mentioned, the connection with business is to prepare students to go into the world and do the same of what we did before, right? And similarly, I mean, you know, our different institutions. Having said that, it does not mean that there are not individuals or collectives of people working in these institutions trying to do something else. So I think it's those two truths at the same time that are really important to keep in mind. It's not just good intentions, because then, you know, we hit those walls. And so from personal experience, I at the moment I'm teaching human rights and politics at the London School of Economics. Before, I was teaching international development studies in Portsmouth. So I'm not an economist, and you'll hear that in the quality of my comments. But I've tried to do a lot of the decolonial stuff, and we'll come to that question, but maybe I can anticipate a bit. And what I've learned is, as a very particular strategy, if you're trying to change something in a hostile environment, which I wasn't necessarily in, there's a lot that you can do without saying that you're doing it. You know, most of us don't have time to check what other people are teaching, so just do it. Call it something else. Don't give it a shiny title. And that was an advice I got from a colleague, because I was like, I'm going to do this new course and it's going to call Decolonizing XYZ. He's like, why don't you just say changing, rethinking? So we went with rethinking, and it's fine. So what you put in there, that would be one advice. The other, at an individual level, is that you cannot be wedded to the institution that you're working in. So you actually need to be willing to walk away. And I think, and that joins a bit what Kate was saying. I'm not saying that everybody has the luxury or whatever, but even mentally, if there's always points where we have to choose either to, be a good soldier and publish in the right place or whatever, or that you actually foreground the reason of why you're there, right? So I still believe in education. I don't believe in the university, for instance, like that, right? So how do you marry these two things? And I have to say, I get a lot of energy from that if you manage to keep very clear in your mind what is your own purpose of being somewhere. And if you can move that away as far as possible from the institution itself, where the institution just becomes a vehicle for you to do something, that's the balancing act, right? But that also makes that we're constantly exhausted, but it also gives you energy. So I'll leave it there for at the moment, but later I'll say some more on decolonizing.
You like it so far? You do. Doing it without saying you're doing it. I like that quote. And then staying true to your purpose. I want to go back to Kate, because you heard the fellow keynote speakers. So what you would like to add or comment on what you heard so far?
Oh, such great points. I wish I was with you in the room. And just to pick on what Sam said first, of course, I'm not trying to say it's all structural, there's nothing we can do. There's so much individuals can do, whether it's, as Olivia just said, just start doing it and give it a name that's strategic at the time. And of course, as Olivia would go on to say, I'm sure there are now many courses in many universities popping up called decolonizing economics or decolonizing. And so the time has arrived. So there are always the pioneers who are ahead of the moment when it's somehow publicly, politically, socially acceptable to have a more radical course. And then the time arises and it starts to happen. I'll just say, I mean, I've been teaching at the Environmental Change Institute in Oxford University for 10 years, teaching a group of around 30 international students who come to do a one-year master's. And just over that 10 years, it's been fascinating seeing who shows up and what the students arrive with an expectation of. So 10 years ago, when I was invited to teach donut economics, and it was seen as a sort of come and teach a few radical ideas on the side. And even I felt somehow cautious, is it okay to teach these ideas? I'm here in the university, will they be accepted? And now the students are actually, far more of them are turning up, expecting to be taught, let me say, ecological economics, absolutely to be taught economics that starts with a planetary reality. And they're very critical if they encounter professors who haven't yet got the memo and still start with supply and demand and talk to them about externalities. And so I'm strongly encouraged by seeing this generation, and let me say they're far more aware of their identity and of global north and south and race and gender, and they bring this, and they will critique immediately if they sense that this is not embedded already, this awareness is not in the curriculum they're being taught. So as ever, we see the young people, the students who in many countries are paying fees for this education. That's what burns it for me. They're in the UK and many other countries, they're turning up, they're paying quite significant fees. And the first thing they have to do is try to rewrite the curriculum that they're paying to be taught. And that's outrageous. So yes, there is movement. And we need to see, the academics who are referred to, whose literature is being cited, and how are we learning from each other. I would love to see more openness amongst professors putting and sharing their curricula online, sharing them openly so that others can learn from them, so that professors can collectively move across universities, across subjects, move at the pace that this now demands.
Okay, thank you. Do we have teachers and professors in the audience? Okay, so you're talking to the right audience, which I think you would like to comment still on that question. Otherwise, I would like to move to the next because it's linked to it, but maybe you still want to, no? Then we go to the first question because it's the follow-up. If we need a systemic change, it needs to start with curriculum. So what should be the goal of rethinking curricula in higher education? Should it be about getting sustainability in there, or should we adapt a rather pluralistic approach? And are there any economic questions or visions that or should be a no-go in higher education? Who would like to open that one? Okay.
I would like to start as a non-economist because maybe I'll have less to say. I mentioned the purpose before, and I think there again, if we want to do change, it might be important to collectively sit down and think, if we want to change, does the purpose of our curriculum also change? So, you know, again, I won't say that necessarily for economics specifically only, but, you know, for instance, when I was teaching international development studies and we were trying to think how to bring in decolonial thought into that, you soon realize that it's not sufficient to just add stuff to it, but weirdly enough, I think the purpose of studying international development is the right one, right? You have a classroom full of students who want to change the world. So that's not that difficult. And, you know, law students, economic students, I don't think all of them have necessarily the same very explicit desire. Some of them do. So it's about, for me, but then when I looked at the curriculum of development studies full of the reproduction of the superiority of the West, to put it very simply, right? You train kids that know hardly anything about the world to go to the global side and help people, while not changing anything about economics, about politics, nothing. So the purpose of choosing it is not aligned with what's in there. So in terms of development studies, for me, it started meaning, let's get rid of this whole curriculum. It does not make sense. Teach them about reparations, teach them about history, start your classes in 1492 rather than, you know, with modernization theory of the 50s and all the other stuff that comes after that. So I think that's what I would say. So the challenge might be different for economics. What is the purpose? And then what's the content of it? And I was talking to Sam before, the example that I came across that is relevant to economics or macroeconomics is an article I read from a colleague who actually went to the orthodox economics textbooks and flagged up this fact that Robinson Crusoe, his story is often brought up to say something about, again, I'm not going to try, but about something quite fundamental about contract exchange and fake mythological equality between all the players in the market. But the core of that history is against the background of such an imperial reality of absolute inequality, a relationship of Robinson Crusoe with Friday, you know, that is deeply tied to enslavement, but also just this natural logic of possessing, desiring to control, mastery, all of that is so embedded in how we understand what economics is for. The danger is that we don't say that. So it becomes just a science where you train. So I think that would be one of the things that I would bring to this question is like, let's look at the purpose of the whole discipline and what is it that needs to be changing in that respect. And a decolonial invitation would be, what would economics that actually are at the service of life rather than power, what would that look like?
Okay, I see Sam and also Kate. So purpose, I mean, if we rethink economic curricula, we should think about the purpose. What's the purpose?
Could I jump in?
Yes.
Last year I published a book which was written in collaboration with a lot of rethinkers and a lot of economics professors, a lot thinking about this question. So what should be the goal of economics education, and also practical tools of how can you do that? And we ended up with a fairly strategic, boring title called Economy Studies, which basically meant the goal of economics is to study the economy. And that sounds a bit tautological, but we think it makes a very fundamental point that would completely change the curricula. Because at the moment, it's not really about understanding the economy we live in that has shaped the past and the present, but it's about thinking in a certain way. So currently, what you often read in textbooks, Muijnck, for example, starts with this, thinking like an economist. And it's thinking in terms of the Homo economicus, making rational decisions, doing difficult mathematics, econometrics, all that kind of stuff. And it's sort of teaching students to look at the world in this way. And we say that should not be the goal. The goal should be understanding a system. And if you want to understand the system and it's a complex system, you need different perspectives. So perhaps you teach some neoclassical economics, but only some, not a full program with only neoclassical economics. Recently, we have also been looking at business education, and I think it's interesting that the current education has a different goal. So as we mentioned, the current education is very focused on preparing students to go into profit-oriented or profit-seeking companies and help those companies make more profit. whether that is through marketing, management, or through accounting. And I think there, the change is, again, a bit different because, and I think I'm very inspired by Martin Parker, who wrote the book Shut Down the Business School. And that's a very direct title. But what he argues for is a very fundamental change. And he says, we should not think about sort of preparing students to make profit in the world. We should prepare students to organize. So this still means that organizing collectively, still keeping track of sort of flows and stocks, not only financial, but also social and ecological, that's still useful skills. But then it's not so much sustainable business, but he calls it the organizing school. And I think that's a very provocative, but I think very useful way of thinking about it. It's not sort of preparing students to be better greenwashers of the future, which is, I think, unfortunately often given sort of the lack of fundamental change I see, at least in the private sector right now. And then with good intentions as teachers, we try to teach them sustainability. But then if they go into companies that will not really make this change, we will help them be more effective at greenwashing, I feel like. So I think that's, as education, we of course do not make the decisions in companies ourselves. But I think it's good to think about. You prepare students to go into these companies, many of whom in the coming decades, maybe I'm too pessimistic, but I think unfortunately will not be fully sustainable all of a sudden and very inclusive and decolonial. So I think it's about preparing them to be in those companies and then be, of course, the change agents.
Okay, I hear two different approaches. One is about studying economics, so offering different models, partly neoliberal, partly feminist economy, partly, and perhaps also doing something with impact or perhaps with a goal or mission. I think it's also about perhaps instead of sustainability, there is another word, regenerative business, for example. I don't know if you want to join in or Kate wants to join in. So should we just tell in studies of economics, it's about all different forms of economics, or should we try to include something which actually is more, I don't know, ambitious or purposeful? I don't know, Kate or...
Oh, I'm happy to jump in then. So I think it's crucial to recognize that these are times that would demand urgent transformation in the way we actually practice economic policy, and whether it's in business or in political decision making. So students coming to university at this time need to be equipped with understanding they're studying a discipline that must be in transformation because the old ideas are no longer fit or are not fit for shaping the future that is desired, and that also the new vision is not fully formed, it's emergent. And that's a tough time. That's a tough context in which to be studying. But I think it's really important for the teachers and professors to hold that space and say that we are relearning this together. And I think the teachers who are going to be most successful in enabling this kind of learning are those who have the courage to be humble and say, I too am relearning. So first of all, just on the title of the conference, can we future-proof an economy? I don't think we can future-proof ourselves at all. It's when we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about a thriving planet. We have taken ourselves so far down this road of climate breakdown, of ecological breakdown. We already know there are inbuilt shocks. And they're happening in the news every day. And Pakistan is the place that people are currently thinking of, but it's happening all around the world all the time. So we can't future-proof ourselves. How can we teach students a syllabus that we know is going to be out of date? And because we are learning new understanding of the world and new kinds of crises are emerging. So I think we can teach at least critical awareness. So for me, systems thinking becomes a really fundamentally valuable skill set to have as part of something I can go to. It's understanding systems dynamics, understanding reinforcing feedback, understanding balancing feedback, so I can at least understand these systems and shocks that are emerging. I think being critical thinkers and pluralistic economic thinkers, and I think the Rethinking Economics movement has done a really good service here to move away from the neoclassical economics to say, you do realize, we must be taught to realize there are many schools of thought, feminist and ecological and behavioral and complexity economics. So trust us to be critical thinkers, teach us to understand, as you would in history, as you would in politics, teach us that there are different worldviews of understanding this subject, and let us have the critical skills to decide which we find compelling and which are most useful at any time. To answer the question, oh, and also 5 design traits that I always say to any student that I'm teaching. I say, be a detective about the organizations, whether they're political parties, whether they're nation states, whether they're companies, whether they are universities. Think about the deep design of an organization. So be a detective. What is the purpose of this organization? What does it serve? How is it relating to others? So what kind of relationships is it in? How is it governed? But crucially, how is it owned and how is it financed? Because these 5 design traits, which come from the corporate thinker Marjorie Kelly, these 5 design traits really take us below the surface of any kind of institution and just help us think more deeply. So I think these are some of the skills that transfer and take us through challenges coming up. On the question of are there any no-go areas, I don't want to say, you know, this cannot happen, this should not happen, but it does not make sense to me to have conversations about economics, macroeconomics, about growth, about the future of nations, about countries in relation to one another, without recognizing that economies are part of society, are part of the living world, and that everything that we are doing needs to be compatible with reproducing conditions to life on this one delicately balanced living planet. So conversations about the economy that don't recognize ecological and climate breakdown and the constraints and the conditions that the economy must be compatible with do not make sense to me. So I find it very, very just so frustrating that macroeconomics textbooks don't yet do this. And that's why I always start with a donut, and I start, you know, what is the purpose of the economy? I would start with that conversation. What is the economy is in service of? As Olivia said, is it in service of life? This donut is one way of saying, let's leave no one falling short on the essentials of life, meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. And I offer that as one vision of a purpose of an economy. Now, you can disagree. Brilliant. Let's have a conversation about the purpose of the economy before we study economics. But the vast majority of economics degrees don't do that. They say, welcome to economics. Well, let's start with supply and demand. We have no conversation about the purpose of what we're in service of. And what sneaks in there? The goal of endless economic growth. And so that's really dangerous not to have that conversation about what is the discipline that we're studying in service of. And I think it should be a really fabulous conversation at the start of a degree of students. What is it that the study that we're focusing on here, what is it in service of? What are we trying to achieve? What would success look like?
Thank you. Applause. I would like to move to Guia because I think from a European perspective, and we're talking about competences and skills, that we would like this younger generation coming in. So not only content, but also competences and skills. Maybe what you developed is supporting us teachers to do something with it, or isn't it? Yeah.
Thanks. It's really easy now for me to jump in. You provided a wonderful bridge. Thanks. So, indeed. So if I may start with my personal experience, back in the day when I was an undergrad student, I studied management. And I mean, sustainability or corporate social responsibility was just an optional module. So, I mean, I was astonished to learn about the wrongdoings of companies. I was more astonished to see that out of 300 students, only 30 were taking that course and understanding or getting to know about these wrongdoings. And what's more astonishing is that 3 years later, I basically come to realize that what I learned was actually outdated. That was the business case for sustainability. You do it if it pays off. Well, not really. But so what we have tried to develop with GreenComp is basically sustainability, not only as knowledge, not only as an add-on onto the curriculum, but as an ensemble of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So you don't only know about sustainability, you embrace it, you live it, you think, plan, and act for sustainability. So the aim of embedding, of equipping students with these competencies is really to provide them with the competencies that are needed for the future, for 2030, for 2050, and so on. So the sustainability competencies that we identified are, I'll just try now, valuing sustainability, promoting fairness, promoting nature, supporting fairness, system thinking, problem framing, critical thinking, futures literacy, adaptability, exploratory thinking, political agency, collective action, and individual initiative. So all these...
Oh, yeah, they deserve an applause. Yeah.
You may download it on the JRC website. We didn't print it for sustainability reasons, but you're welcome to download it, only if you're gonna read it. So basically, indeed, the aim is really to embrace and, infuse these competencies in any curriculum, not just in the economics curriculum, in a transversal manner, so that every student, can learn about the orthodox economics or, what is needed to be learned right now, but develop, a sustainability mindset to really think for themselves.
Thank you. So let's replace growth mindset by a sustainability mindset would be nice. Anyway, any reactions? Any conclusions from this topic? So there are no goes?
I think what for me is really a no-go, and I think for a lot of rethinkers, and when it really feels like indoctrination, also from personal experience, is when I need to learn, or whether I need to sort of adopt a way of seeing the world, certain values. And to me, it doesn't even matter which approach that is. Even if it is the one I might have chosen myself, if you force it on me, I think education is wrong. Because then it's indoctrination. It should be my own choice as critical person. I think for any citizen, I think that's the goal of sort of, freedom, democracy, that we are willing to give everyone sort of the ability to think for themselves. And I think in education, this is quite a challenge.
Olivia wants to jump in on what you're...
But just to finish my point, I think a lot of students don't, especially in economics, business, and probably law as well, but I have less experience with that, do not come in thinking about sort of their own place in the world and very conscious about what is my impact. And I think that's something I think that education really should trigger. And what answers they come up with, we should just provide them with different options. Just show them, you can think in this way, you can think in that way, inspire them, but let them make the choice themselves.
So, thanks.
We're going to have a voting system here, the sound level. Yeah.
But indeed, if I'm actually going to address also the number 5, I think, question. Indeed, in GreenComp, we provide an area that is embracing sustainability values. That is not just about teaching students some values for sustainability. It's actually, equipping them with the critical reflection that is needed to understand that values are constructs. You can choose to prioritize the values that are in line with sustainability. You can understand who doesn't do that, and you can also choose not to do that, hopefully not. But that's really the aim of GreenComp, not to teach values, but to train the mind to prioritize those for sustainability.
Any comments? Kate, still want to add something to it? Or
I think these are great comments.
Okay. We have like 10 minutes left for the last question, which was the... Yeah, it's going quick, unfortunately. Question number 6. Decolonizing the curriculum in a broad sense is a very important goal. Where do you already see good practices in this field? And how can we attract a greater diversity of students in higher education? Who wants to open?
I've already flagged up some things, and maybe before jumping into good practices, and actually maybe encouraging not always to immediately jump to that what we do good. And I say this not at an individual level, but more as institutions. Walking here, unfortunately, I was listening to the BBC World Service, and Boris Johnson was giving his exit speech. It was one breakfast, right? Like listing all the stuff that he done well, whatever. And I think a lot of the times when
we have quite a few people from the UK here.
Sorry to inflict this person onto this, but it's a good example where a lot of the times also when we are, and I'm not saying Johnson is, but when we are committed to change, especially institutionally, we are very keen on listing all the stuff we already do great. And I don't mean this in a discouraging way, but what I understood from decolonial thought, and maybe also some of the things that you've heard through the Black Lives Matter thing, is we need to find time and space and be comfortable to sit with what we should get rid of. So abolitionist thought, or thought of what it is that we have to stop doing, so the no-goes from before. And I say this as an intro to talking about decolonization, because it has entered, as Kate said, the management structures. And as soon as management is excited about something, it's been diluted to the point that it won't change anything. Again, I don't want to be too cynical, but the first very practical thing to keep in mind is that we cannot make the mistake to think that decolonization is just about diversity and inclusion. Because especially when we think of sustainability or economics, if you have a system that is designed to kill most of the planet and leave most of the people of this planet in poverty, you don't want to include people to that show. You actually need to think, what are the things that we need to do to blow up that system, right? So, and I think, I don't need the clapping.
Rebellion in the classroom.
So where the diversity comes in is that you need to include a lot more people that have a radically different interest in changing that system than those who are around the table already. So many of us, if we're honest, myself included, we do have a little interest in keeping most of the things the same because we're not on the bottom of the system. So for me, that's what diversity and inclusion is about, but it has to be at the service of blowing up the system rather than keeping the system the same and being seen, virtue politics-wise, that we're being more progressive, more open, more woke, all of that. And so at the same time, we are in our institutions. So strategically, again, I would say I'm not sad that my university management is using decolonial language now, but I have the responsibility to think, how can I translate that in something that might be transformative? So as you were saying, that this collective language, it is important, but it's really important to not participate in the cooptation. So for instance, that would mean, when they bring it up in a meeting, what is the strategy for the next 5 years of our department, blah, blah, blah. We all know these things. Then I would say decolonization might mean about having a reading list or curriculum that doesn't only include old white dead man, the way we're gonna teach them. But then rather than just say, in your free time, go and restudy this yourself and then include it, and then next year we're gonna do the tick the box exercise. You ask for money and you say, curriculum development, or the many things that normally you would, hire consultancy firms, pay shitloads of money to actually have some change done. Get some of that money for the radical work you want to do. And we all need to go home and study. But I have a vested interest to have a diverse curriculum because I happen to have a phase for which the university was not designed, but I cannot expect all of my colleagues to have that same desire, and for other issues I might not have that desire either. So if it becomes part of the competences and the things so it's not just about being radical, talk about it and go home. We can be strategic with the money and the interests that are there, but we also cannot be naive to think that it's just about adding stuff to what is a very problematic show.
It's a nice insight. So I suppose some people here want to react or add to that comment. It's quiet here at the moment.
I'm happy to jump in and add. Sorry, I can't see if the others were about to. So just one way I think it's really important to help students and those teaching really understand why it matters that a more a wider range of views are taught and are part of the reading. Because somebody might say, well, you know, what's wrong with the founding fathers of economics? So Adam Smith and John Stuart Mill and John Maynard Keynes and Milton Friedman and Karl Marx, and well, they were brilliant thinkers. What's, you know, we need to learn all their ideas. It's really, it matters to notice why does it matter that they were all men, that they were all white, that they were all from colonizing countries. I can give it in the story. Adam Smith, at the age of 43, when he wrote The Wealth of Nations about the power of markets, he was unmarried, he had no children, he was living at home with his mum. His mum was cooking his dinner every day. So he failed to see the world of feminist economics, of unpaid caring work. So we, you know, David Ricardo, he thought that we were going to be limited by, the economy was going to be limited by the land availability. And then, oh, suddenly, look, lots of land has opened up overseas. He turned his attention away from land productivity to labor productivity. And that's still where it's obsessively focused now. So who we are shapes our life experiences, shapes what's at the center of our vision and what's invisible and peripheral. And that is one reason why it really matters having far more diverse perspectives. It's no coincidence that Amartya Sen did not start his economics with the market. He started with human entitlements and capabilities, because he saw that that is what every person has a claim to. Ha-Joon Chang was born in South Korea when it was called a third world country, and he saw his nation industrialize and succeed. It's no surprise that he tells a very different story about trade and finance and international relations than the mainstream textbooks teach us. The feminist economists, so many female thinkers who I've been influenced by, tell a very different story than the mainstream teaching. So it's really important that we understand why having a far more diverse perspective, because no one of us will see everything. And then we also have to think of our own positionality. And I recognize myself as a woman, as a white, somebody racialized as white, as somebody from a privileged background, teaching in a privileged university in the global north. All of this is shaping what I'm seeing and what I'm doing, and I have to take it into account so that I have the capacity to recognize I'm starting somewhere and I need to reach and widen my perspective, otherwise it'll never happen. And then we also need to think about our language. So whenever I'm in a conversation and someone starts talking about developed countries and developing countries, I'll say, heck, can we just stop a moment? I've never encountered a country that has the right to call itself developed, because every single high income country in the world is massively overshooting planetary boundaries and destroying the life supporting systems of this planet. So let's also remove that sort of hierarchy from our language that's totally false. It gives a false comfort that we in the developed world can talk about developing countries. It's totally out of date. So let's also celebrate catching ourselves when we use language that's trapping us in frames that don't serve anybody.
We are reaching the end of the first debate. So I have a question for all of you, which is actually not prepared. Imagine you're a magician and you can, and you have one wish to have an impact or a change. What would you wish? Linked with education, yeah. Well, it's a good remark. So, yeah.
Can we wish to have 10 wishes?
No, there's only one. So what is the real thing you're passionate about, you really would like to see change? You, from your perspective, from who you are, with your background. So what is the thing you really would like to create? Oh. Silence.
Well, from my perspective, I would really like for GreenComp to be taken over and to be adapted and adopted by many institutions, trainers, educators, learners, self-learners, so that the community around GreenComp grows, but also that, as we say in the report, GreenComp is a dynamic living document. So sustainability, the concept of sustainability changes every day, unfortunately. So hopefully with an active community, also GreenComp will evolve and will be fit for purpose, but also useful for educators, trainers, but also learners.
So that's your purpose at the moment in life.
Well, also wish.
Okay, and wish. Thank you. Thank you very much, Olivia. Who's next?
I think my wish would be to get a huge budget. I think tying into what Olivia was saying, because I think it's often also just indeed the ability to spend time on this, to either develop it, but also for teachers just to change what they teach, just to get a huge budget, but also institutional support from sort of the top of the discipline to develop a new way of really starting from this fundamental aspect of getting students to think for themselves about what their role is in the world. That's my goal.
Okay, thanks. Wish him a good budget. A big one. We go to Olivia and then Kate.
So I'm going to stay with the magician thing, right? Because a lot of the goals, I think, we can chip away at them on a daily basis, as you are all doing. And then I would wish, actually, I'm going to sound like a communist, but free education for all, because I think we are going to a very dangerous place. And again, I'm speaking from the UK now, but I was educated in Belgium. But this idea that we restrict more and more the access to learning, which is in part of what Kate started with, the different ways in which we socialize to publish for the same, 3 boring journals and all of that. But the fact that education, and I would include even the media as well, is being more and more locked in by market logic is actually the structure against which we're trying to have these conversations. So free education for all.
And Kate, last word is for you.
I'll end with a wish that I think we can all help make happen. And the reason why people are in the room is because they're here to make it happen. The wish for educators to have the courage of our times and to recognize and to have the humility that we too are relearning. And isn't that something to celebrate, that we are relearning along with students, and to make that relearning an adventure, and to have the humility and confidence to be open to trying out learning on flip lecturing, embodied learning, and learn back from the students so that we're open. We are learning with you how to teach transformative thinking in times that demand transformation so fast. It's a very equalizing relationship between teachers and students, but every time I've seen it, I know students massively appreciate it, and I think it strengthens their own learning journey too.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the 4 fantastic people in the panel. For those physically present, there is a gift for Kate. Well, no, bullshit. So this is the end of Keynote debate number 1. You're all invited now to go outside for a group picture. And then at 11:15, the workshops are going to start. There will be a kind of sound, which is going to... Yeah, it's like we're in a prison, so there will be no... Okay, enjoy your break. See you later, and have a nice morning.